On this channel, we've covered a lot of price predictions, and although a $357 XRP sounds absolutely bonkers, it's not impossible. And a move from $2.16 up to $357 would be about a 16,000% gain and would echo of the prior move that XRP made in 2017 and 2018, all the way to a new all-time high of $3.31 for the very first time. And this is according to one XRP community member who shared that this $357 price point is not unrealistic based on the XRPL's rate of adoption and utility. If what Brad Garlinghouse shared in the latest conference video is real. One member actually approached him directly at the conference and asked him for his take, and he let something slip. And the info he shared is groundbreaking, which gives XRP holders complete confidence in the future of their token and investment. And here's what makes things crazy. As most people know, the goal of any wise CEO would be to give conservative estimations and predictions because you want to underpromise and overdeliver. If you overpromise and then you deliver just normal or average results, your stock value will go down. It's the same with crypto, and even more so for Ripple, as the company's value is directly tied to the XRP token, its adoption, and demand, being that it's the largest asset sitting on their balance sheet. So we'll be diving into this as well as the latest macro news that's been hammering the markets and keeping the prices of crypto suppressed, as a Wall Street Journal article states that some folks and major investors are moving into cash or international stocks to spare themselves the anxiety that comes when markets turn volatile. And boy, has it been a volatile past few months. So stick around until the end, because not only will I share when XRP will be primed to explode, but what needs to happen first, and if it's really possible for XRP to hit that $357 target based on what Brad Garlinghouse shared and the info from that community member. Also, really quickly before we dive into the video, head on over to Bull Runners HQ on Twitter or X, and be sure to check out the pinned post if you want to enter to win our $100 worth of XRP weekly giveaway. You do need to follow through with all three of these steps, and we do double verify that they have been completed, and each week the winner is completely random as well. All you need to do is follow us, like, retweet, and comment XRP on that pinned post, and then subscribe to our daily crypto newsletter where you're going to get a ton of free value anyways, which is Altcoin Secrets, the free guidebook that unlocks the 23 secrets to becoming a crypto millionaire. All you have to do is enter your email right here, and we will announce the winner every single week on this list. And as always, if you're feeling blessed and bullish, comment 777. And if you're going to be the wealthiest person in your family tree, smash the subscribe button. Hello and welcome back to the channel, my friend. If you're new here, my name is Paul, and you can find me on Twitter or X at PauliDeFi, PAULIEDEFI. It has been an interesting ride in markets over the last few months, as XRP pumped all the way up to 265 on May 14th, and since that point in time we've been down for an intermediate term downtrend. You can see that we have a series of lower highs and lower lows, with a potential bottom right here at about $2.10, which seems to be a support. However, XRP has failed to break above this descending wedge or flag, and so it's important to remain neutral right now, considering many investors are literally just locking in gains over the last 6 to 8 months that they've made because of the market volatility. Nobody knows what's really going to happen next, considering there's just a lot of macro things happening in the backdrop. One of those being Israel and Iran air attacks, as Netanyahu says the conflict could lead to a regime change in Iran. Now, there's a lot of politics going on in the background. A lot of people have opinions about what's really happening. Many people are skeptical about whether or not Israel is trying to drag the United States into yet another war and destabilize another country in the Middle East to essentially place Israel as the leading or dominant force in that entire portion of the world. Now, many people were skeptical about what would occur, whether or not Donald Trump was behind this war, what we really had at stake here, as a speech from Netanyahu was trying to bolster support among Americans. Donald Trump came out on Truth Social and stated that the US had nothing to do with the attack on Iran tonight. Furthermore, Trump is actually calling for peace. So people are still uneasy because it's possible that we might have an attack on US soil, and we don't know whether it would come from Iran or even potentially Israel to bolster this war, to push support among Americans to fund yet another war. Donald Trump is saying that Israel and Iran should make a deal and that he wants there to be peace and that they need to stop, which is providing some confidence for the markets, but still there's so much uncertainty that markets have remained relatively flat. And so with trade tensions between China and the US, with no resolution between Ukraine and Russia, and now an issue in the Middle East, it doesn't matter that Trump is the most pro-crypto president in history and puts videos out like this. The markets want complete and total confidence before they make moves to new all-time highs. Yes, Bitcoin continues to gain in dominance, but things like XRP have been chilling out in a range for quite some time now. So the real question is, could we hit $357 with this new information directly from Brad Garlinghouse? Well, first we're going to watch this video from Trump, then we're going to dive into that hidden cam video of Brad Garlinghouse at the latest Singapore event, and then we will discuss whether or not it's even possible for XRP to hit $357. Let's have a listen to Trump recently.
At the Coinbase State of Crypto Summit, I'm delighted to speak to some of the greatest visionaries and pioneers in the fields of tech and finance who are working to build a future powered by crypto. Many have called me the first crypto president. That's an honor. I really do consider that a very big honor, actually. And starting on day one, we ended the Biden administration's war on crypto. It was an absolute war and very unfair. And we unleashed American innovators to do what you do best, lead the world into new frontiers. We ended Operation Choke Point 2.0. I created the first presidential working group on digital assets. I named a pro-freedom, pro-innovation SEC chair, a great man named Paul Atkins, and we created the U.S. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve and the United States Digital Asset Stockpile. But we are not done yet. My administration is working with Congress to pass the Genius Act, supporting the creation of dollar-backed stablecoins. And we also will be working to create clear and simple market frameworks that will allow America to dominate the future of crypto and Bitcoin. Congratulations to everyone at this exciting time in your industry and in our country's life. I wish you all the best of luck.
Now, one of the most important things that Donald Trump shared there, everyone's heard all of this stuff before, is the fact that the Genius Act is going to solidify the dominance of the US dollar, and the government will definitely be behind it because the largest holders of US treasuries into the future will be stablecoin suppliers. So much so that even giants like Walmart and now Amazon are exploring launching their own stablecoins. And the first companies to dominate the stablecoin market are going to win big long term. They are arguably some of the most profitable companies on planet Earth, and the use case for stablecoins seems to be never ending, with real world assets on the horizon, tokenized treasuries, real estate, all sorts of asset classes, and more. And just the fact that XRP, or better yet Ripple, offers the RLUSD stablecoin is huge, considering they are in a position to win because of their proximity to power and key decision makers. For example, Brad Garlinghouse seems to be in all of the right rooms, not only over at the White House, but just a few Singapore fintech festivals ago, Brad Garlinghouse was seen in a photo with the IMF key leaders like Christine Lagarde, and even a woman who used to work for Ripple that is now over at the IMF alongside Swift. Now, speaking of Swift, here is a video that seems to be taken from someone's body cam where Brad Garlinghouse probably didn't know that he was being filmed. When asked about XRP and Ripple, he made a huge statement, or better yet, let it slip, and I think he was being conservative. Let's have a listen to this video.
5 years, yeah. So, I mean,
It's for a dumb reason.
Swift today, there's two ways to think about Swift. There's a messaging, there's liquidity. Liquidity is owned by the banks. I think less about the messaging and more about liquidity. Because if you're driving all the liquidity, that's good for XRP. Anyway, so I'll say 5 years, 14%. 5 years, yeah.
Now, this led one community member and actually led a lot of people to speculate on what would happen if Brad Garlinghouse is sharing something like that. Just the fact that XRP could take 14% of the Swift network, which moves about $150 trillion a year. I'm not too sure where they're getting this statistic. It's actually closer into the quadrillions, would get you to $21 trillion in value on the XRPL network. That's a $357 XRP price based on cross-border payment utility. So now let's get to the facts, because I think a lot can be easily misinterpreted, and these videos, or better yet, people posting online, can be quite misleading. For example, XRP in the next 5 years taking over 14% of Swift does not actually mean that all of that money is going to go directly into the value of the token. This simply means that the XRPL could potentially move closer to 14% of what Swift is currently moving, which is actually higher than what this person shared at $150 trillion per year. So they just come up with some random number without actually knowing the facts, and then basically 14% of 150 trillion is $21 trillion in value. And so I went ahead and double verified that is actually what they're getting at, and asked if the XRP price went to $357, and we're even talking on thin liquidity and larger than average or high demand, what would the potential market cap be, which came out to about $21 trillion. That's assuming that no more XRP is going to hit the market. But at one point, David Schwartz even mentioned that Ripple will always act in its own interest for that of its shareholders. Yes, there are venture capitalists that invested in Ripple, the company, which owns the majority of the XRP tokens that have not yet reached supply. So when you actually look at something like CoinMarketCap, you can see that we have 58.8 billion XRP circulating. Assuming no more of these hit the market, which at some point in time would be foolish for the team at Ripple not to sell into a very high priced market, and more of the supply hitting the market will drop the price of XRP if demand does not increase to meet it. This is no different than the US dollar that is inflationary. The good news about XRP is that we know the max supply on chain is 100 billion, whereas with the dollar, it's always and ever increasing upon the will of the Fed and our government. In other words, tweets like this don't really make sense. However, I could see why he would come up with a 357 XRP price if they are actually going to move $21 trillion in market cap into the XRP token, even on thinner liquidity. It would still require a stupid amount of money worldwide and globally to buy and hold the XRP token, but not necessarily use the XRPL. You don't need to use the XRPL in order to buy the XRP token. On the flip side, a very small amount of XRP could be used on chain, let's say thousands of XRP, in terms of funding fees to actually move trillions of dollars in stable coins. In other words, a lot of that business could be captured by Ripple, the company. And yes, as XRP is used, a small fraction will be burned. But ultimately, in order for the price to go to $357, a crazy amount of the XRP token would need to be burned. And it would need to be a far larger market than Bitcoin, to the tune of literally 10 times. So I just don't see that happening in the next 5 years. So even though a chart like this I went ahead and actually headed over to Swift, actual company, and downloaded their 2024 annual report. And in that report, we have all of their numbers. They don't hide anything. They do move trillions and trillions and even quadrillions per year for banks. However, it requires a lot in order to run a company like Swift, and it would be no different with Ripple even if they are more efficient. In other words, in 2024, in terms of euros, their revenue was $1.1 billion. Their expenses came out to $982 million, and their profit for the year was $132 million. And we know this because it's directly on their report. This is year end of 2024. And as you can see, their business model has been growing basically year over year, except from 2021 to 2022. But just because they're moving trillions or quadrillions of dollars doesn't mean that that all finds its way into Swift as a company and their stock. It's no different than BlackRock, managing trillions upon trillions of dollars and being the largest asset manager on planet Earth. They're still only profitable to the tune of billions of dollars. And that's because they just charge small fees to facilitate these deals. And so it's really important not to fall for everything you see online, and also to check the actual financials from companies that are already in a position that Ripple would like to be in. The fact that Ripple and Brad Garlinghouse are admitting that they could capture in the next 5 years 14% of the volume that Swift is doing leads me to believe that this would still not be as big of a business model as a stablecoin. Otherwise, players like Amazon and Walmart would already be doing it. But instead, they're looking at the stablecoin business because it is a far more profitable business. Still, let's go ahead and take a look at the XRP chart, and we're going to do it on a weekly time frame because there's a lot we could get lost into when it comes to the localized price action. But as you can see right here, we had our local or prior all-time high back in 2018, and yet again in January of this year, where Ripple has failed to break above that $3 range, which seems to be a pretty strong resistance. However, we're also being supported at the prior all-time highs of 2021. So we're starting to build a pretty long, strong range of support between $1.80 all the way up to $3. And any price back above the 265 range will take us likely into the $3 range. A break above $3 will likely take us up to my first personal major target, which I think is going to be a psychological resistance for a lot of investors and an area where a lot of bigger players might take some profits, which is going to be $5. A $5 XRP is still going to be at least 130% from here. So it's not going to be a bad way to double your money. However, I'm going to wait for a slight break above this range in order to really enter, considering we are still trending to the downside. And if you're looking at a weekly time frame, it tosses support at the 205 level with this descending wedge. Well, for what we have a bull flag, I would still like to see the price break above this descending wedge right here at about 240 at least in order to confirm that this move is serious. Right now, this thing is still flat and there is potential that we could break down even further. So why add to the risk? And that's it for the video, folks. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe to the channel and also head on over to bullrunners.com/altcoin secrets. Or actually, if you just click that link, that very first link down below, it should take you to this page where you can download the ebook absolutely free. It'll be sent to your inbox in order to get the 23 secrets to becoming a crypto millionaire this bull market cycle. Thanks so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Goodbye, my friend.